The Janitor Who Held the Line. Part 1. 3 weeks later. Cole Ferris had not mopped a floor in 3 weeks, and he missed it more than he expected to. The Thessanari envoy's quarters had been replaced within 48 hours of the freight terminal by something considerably more secure, a converted floor of an unremarkable office building 2 miles from the Halcyon Tower, its windows reinforced with the same rail charge-resistant panelling the consulate should have installed in the first place, its access points monitored by a rotating security detail, handpicked personally by Queen Aislinn, rather than inherited from whatever compromised roster had been running the old consulate. Lyra called it the safe house, in the dry, understated way she'd taken to calling most things since that first night. Cole privately thought of it as the world's most heavily guarded waiting room. He was, officially, a person of interest to the inquiry material witness. The paperwork called him, though everyone involved understood the term was doing a great deal of polite work to avoid saying the man the princess insists on keeping nearby. He'd been debriefed 4 times by 4 different Thessanari investigators, each one more careful than the last, each one circling the same handful of facts. The forged maintenance request, the restricted rail charge, the black sedan that had vanished from every traffic camera within 6 blocks of the freight yard before the inquiry's local liaisons could trace its plates. None of it had produced an arrest. All of it had produced more questions. His sister Priya had taken the entire situation with considerably more equanimity than Cole had expected, though she'd made him promise, in the particular tone she reserved for things she actually meant, that he'd call her the moment any of it stopped being safe enough for him to keep doing whatever it was he was doing. He'd called twice in 3 weeks, both times with answers vague enough to satisfy a security clearance he didn't technically possess, both times ending with Priya telling him, half joking and half not, that she fully expected to read about him in a diplomatic incident report eventually, and that she'd appreciate it if he tried not to die before she got the chance to say, "I told you so." He missed his old shift more than he expected to admit out loud the particular, unglamorous peace of an empty building at 2 a.m, a mop bucket squeaking down a quiet corridor, nothing more complicated to manage than a stuck fire door or a jammed paper towel dispenser. He had not realized until it was gone how much of his sense of himself had been built on simply being good at something nobody else paid much attention to. "You're doing the thing again," Lyra said, looking up from the data terminal in the safe house's main room, where she'd spent most of the last 3 weeks passing inquiry transcripts with the particular grim patience of someone who had decided that understanding a threat was the closest thing available to controlling it. "What thing?" "Staring at the wall like it owes you an explanation. You did it constantly in that corridor, the first night. I assumed it was a stress response. I am beginning to suspect it is simply a personality trait." "It's a coping mechanism," Cole said, settling into the chair across from her. "Walls don't talk back, mostly easier to stare at than people. I will try not to take that personally." "You're the exception," he said, and meant it more than the easy tone let on, and the small private smile that crossed her face in response had become, over 3 weeks, something Cole found himself looking forward to more than he was entirely comfortable admitting. The terminal chimed. Lyra's expression shifted immediately, the warmth draining into something more careful, more guarded, the look she wore whenever a transmission arrived from home, never knowing until she had read the first line whether it carried good news or worse. She read. Her face went very still. "What is it?" Cole asked. "Lord Callanor has responded to the Queen's summons," Lyra said slowly. "After 3 weeks of silence. He claims he was conducting his own private inquiry, separate from the court's, and has uncovered evidence he says proves his innocence." She looked up. "He has requested to deliver that evidence to my mother in person. Here, on Earth." "That doesn't sound like proving innocence," Cole said. "That sounds like wanting to be in the room when whatever happens next happens." "Yes," Lyra agreed grimly. "That had occurred to me as well. Part 2. A lord at the door. Lord Vasher Kalanor arrived 4 days later aboard a Thessanari diplomatic transport, cleared through Earth orbital customs with the kind of expedited paperwork that only existed for people whose presence a sitting queen had personally authorized, regardless of how much that queen privately distrusted the man requesting it. The 4 days leading up to his arrival had not been quiet. Director Hess's team had quietly tightened security around the safe house, doubling the rotation, running fresh sweeps for surveillance devices, treating Kalanor's visit less like a diplomatic courtesy and more like the controlled approach of a man who might, depending on how the evidence ultimately broke, turn out to be either an ally or the very architect of the conspiracy he claimed to be helping unravel. "What if he's lying?" Cole had asked Lyra the night before, the two of them going over security logistics with Hess's team late into the evening. "What if this whole "I've been investigating my own innocence" thing is just him getting ahead of the inquiry before it catches up to him? Then we will find out. Carefully, with every precaution Director Hess's team can provide, Lyra had said. But I do not believe Kalanor would risk travelling to Earth himself if he intended deception. A guilty man flees, or hides, or sends proxies. He would not place himself this close to the people he had wronged unless he genuinely believed the evidence would clear him. Or unless he's confident enough in his own cover that he thinks showing up makes him look innocent by default. That, Lyra admitted, is also possible. We will know soon enough. Cole watched the arrival from the safe house's security monitors, standing slightly behind Lyra in a way that had become habit rather than instruction, close enough to act, far enough to let her lead. Kalanor cut an imposing figure even through the grainy feed, tall, silver-maned, dressed in the formal dark blue of the Thessanari Military Command, moving with the unhurried confidence of a man who had spent 30 years being the most dangerous person in every room he entered and had not yet encountered evidence to the contrary. "He looks exactly like his photographs," Cole said. "He looks exactly like the man who taught me to ride a sand glider when I was 9 years old," Lyra said quietly. "I keep trying to reconcile that memory with the man who may have ordered my death. I have not yet succeeded." The meeting took place in the safe house's central room, under heavier security than Cole had seen since the freight terminal's 6 Thessanari guards, positioned at every entrance, the Queen herself present via a secure holographic relay, her projected image seated at the head of the table with an expression that made even the feed's slight distortion feel like an understatement of how cold her patience had worn. Kalanor bowed to the Queen's projection, to Lyra, and after a brief, assessing pause to Cole as well, a courtesy that visibly surprised everyone in the room except Kalanor himself. "Your Highness! Your Majesty!" His voice carried the same unhurried confidence as his bearing. "And the Earth citizen who has apparently become indispensable enough to attend a Thessanari security briefing. I confess I did not expect that detail to be accurate, but I am pleased to find it so. It speaks well of your judgment, Lyra, even if it speaks poorly, for protocol." "You did not come here to discuss protocol," Queen Aislin's projection said, voice flat and unforgiving. "You came to explain 3 weeks of silence following an assassination attempt on my daughter conducted with a weapon traceable to your own armory." "I came," Kalanor said, "because someone within this court wished it to look that way, and I required 3 weeks to prove it." He produced a data chip, identical in form to the one Sergeant Ryland had once set on an arena floor a galaxy away, and set it on the table with the same deliberate care. This contains a full forensic audit of the armory's access logs for the month preceding the attack. It shows precisely who withdrew the rail charge used against Lyra, and precisely how my own authorization codes were used without my knowledge to clear that withdrawal. The Queen's projections studied the chip for a long moment. "And who withdrew it?" "Commander Ressa Voth," Kalanor said. "My second in command for the last 6 years." a woman I trusted enough to grant standing access to my authorization codes for operational efficiency, a trust I now understand to have been catastrophically misplaced. Part 3. The shape of a larger plot. "Where is Commander Voth now?" Lyra asked, voice tight. "Gone," Kalanor said. "She left the homeworld 9 days before the attack, officially on a routine fleet inspection circuit. She has not reported in since, and her last confirmed location places her transiting through the same relay corridor as—" He paused, something grim entering his expression. "As your brother's survey expedition." The room went very still. "You're saying Thomas's disappearance and the attack on me are connected," Lyra said. "I am saying I do not yet know," Kalanor said carefully, "but I find the timing considerably more than coincidental, and I have spent 3 weeks unable to shake the suspicion that whoever orchestrated this did not act alone, and did not act for the simple reasons I initially assumed. I opposed the Earth Treaty in open council because I still believe, that Thessanar's resources are better spent closer to home, but I would never have sanctioned an assassination to win that argument, and the evidence increasingly suggests this was never truly about the treaty at all." "Then what was it about?" Cole asked, speaking for the first time since the meeting began, and feeling every eye in the room shift toward him with varying degrees of surprise that he'd spoken at all. Kalanor regarded him for a long moment, something almost approving in the assessment. "A fair question, and one I do not have a complete answer to. But Commander Voth's service record includes 18 months attached to a joint coalition task force investigating irregular weapons trafficking along the outer trade corridors, the same corridors your brother's expedition was charting. I believe whatever Voth uncovered or became involved in during that posting is the true root of this. The attack on Lyra may have been intended less to collapse the Earth Treaty and more to eliminate a witness, or a complication, to something considerably larger than either of our courts have yet uncovered." "What kind of trafficking?" Cole asked. "Weapons, primarily, though the task force's final report heavily redacted. Even to my own clearance referenced concerns about trafficked labor as well. Beings moved across borders without consent, sold into service on remote mining operations and unregulated industrial worlds where coalition oversight rarely reaches." Kalanor's expression had gone grim. If Voth uncovered something of that scale during her posting, and chose silence or complicity over exposure, the resources available to whoever she now answers to would easily explain both the rail charge and, I suspect, considerably more than we have yet discovered. The Queen's projection was silent for a long moment, processing. "You are suggesting my daughter was a target of convenience, that the true threat lies elsewhere." "I am suggesting," Kalanor said, "that we have spent 3 weeks investigating the wrong question entirely, and that the right one may already have cost us a missing prince and a vanished commander, with considerably worse still to come if we do not move quickly." Part 4. A walk in the dark, Lyra found Cole on the safe house's small rooftop garden, an hour after Kalanor's briefing ended, staring out at the city skyline with the particular stillness he'd worn through most of the meeting. "You're doing the wall thing again," she said, settling beside him at the railing. "Except the wall is the entire city this time." "Yeah, well, the city's got a lot more to explain than the wall did." He glanced at her. "You okay?" "No," Lyra admitted, more honestly than she might have 3 weeks earlier, before a night of broken glass and underground tunnels had taught her that honesty cost less than she'd once believed. "My brother may be missing because of something far larger than any of us understood. The man who taught me to ride a sand glider may have been manipulated by his own second-in-command into looking guilty of a crime he did not commit. And the attempt on my life, which I had begun to think of as a closed chapter, may simply be the visible edge of something considerably worse, still unfolding, somewhere none of us can currently see." "That's a lot to carry." "It is," she agreed. "I find it carries more easily with you beside me, which I recognize is an inconvenient thing to admit to a man my mother's security advisors still have not fully cleared, and whose involvement in any of this remains, diplomatically speaking, complicated. Complicated's becoming kind of our thing, Cole said. It is, Lyra said, and the small smile that followed carried more warmth than the grim weight of the afternoon should have allowed. She reached over, taking his hand the way she had in the freight container 3 weeks earlier, steadier now, more certain. Whatever Voth uncovered, whatever happened to Tamis, whoever is truly behind this, I do not intend to face it from inside this safe house, waiting for someone else to solve it on my behalf. Figured you'd say that. And I do not intend to face it without you, regardless of what protocol prefers. Cole turned to look at her properly, the city lights catching the faint luminescence of her skin the same way the corridor lights had, that first impossible night. Then I guess we're doing this the same way we did the first time. Together, mostly improvised, and probably against somebody's better judgment. That has so far worked rather well for us, Lyra said, and the kiss that followed unplanned, unhurried 3 weeks overdue by both their reckonings, settled something between them that neither the inquiry nor the danger still circling them from somewhere unseen had managed to disturb. Part 5. The second attempt. Reconsidered. It was Cole 3 days later, reviewing the inquiry's growing case file with the same patient, unglamorous attention he'd once given to a building's overlooked plumbing, who noticed the detail everyone else had missed. The black sedan, he said, interrupting a security briefing with enough abruptness that 4 Thessanari investigators turned to look at him at once. The one from the second attempt. The rooftop chase. Nobody's traced its plates because the plates were never real, right? Local source, rental fraud, untraceable. Correct, said the lead investigator, a clipped, efficient woman named Director Hess, who Cole had grown cautiously fond of over 3 weeks of debriefs. We've confirmed the vehicle itself was reported stolen 11 days prior, plates swapped before use. Right, but the weapon, Cole pressed. The one through the sedan window. That wasn't a rail charge. I remember it different shape, different sound. You said Voth withdrew the rail charge used in the window shot. Did anybody actually run the second weapon against the armory logs? A long silence followed, the kind that meant, in Cole's growing experience of high-stakes briefings, that he'd just asked a question nobody else had thought to ask. Director Hess pulled up the relevant file, scanning quickly, something tightening in her expression as she read. No, she admitted. We assumed the same source for both attempts. We never separately verified the second weapon's origin. It took 11 hours of cross-referencing Hess's team, working alongside Kalinor's forensic auditors. Lyra and Cole both contributing what details they could remember from a day that had, at the time, felt too chaotic to commit fully to memory before the answer surfaced, and when it did, it changed the shape of everything they thought they understood. It's not Thessanari manufacture, Hess said finally, voice tight with the particular controlled alarm of someone delivering very bad news as professionally as possible. The weapon from the rooftop pursuit is Earth-manufactured, military-grade restricted distribution, the kind of hardware that requires either government authorization or black market connections most private buyers simply do not have access to. The room went very quiet. Someone on Earth has military-grade weapons access, Lyra said slowly, and used it to assist in an attempt on my life, in coordination with a Thessanari court conspiracy that may also be connected to my brother's disappearance and a trafficking investigation along the outer trade corridors. She looked around the room. That is not a coincidence. That is a conspiracy spanning 2 worlds, with resources considerably beyond anything a single disgruntled commander could arrange alone and all. Which means, Cole said quietly, whoever's really behind this isn't just trying to stop a treaty. They're already operating like the treaty already happened, like they're already moving stuff and people across both sides, and Lyra almost dying was just collateral to whatever the real operation actually is. Director Hess looked at him for a long moment, something like reluctant respect crossing her face. I would very much like to know how a building maintenance worker keeps noticing what trained investigators miss. 6 years of finding stuff nobody else bothered looking for, Cole said. Turns out it's a transferable skill. Part 6. Earth's Side of the Conspiracy. The Earth-manufactured weapon traced, after another 2 days of careful, frustrating investigation, to a private security contractor named Dale Marsh, a name that meant nothing to Cole until Director Hess pulled his employment history and Cole felt something cold settle low in his stomach. He worked Halcyon Tower security, Cole said, staring at the file. 3 years ago. I remember him. Quiet guy, kept to himself. Got let go after some kind of internal review nobody ever explained to the rest of us. The review found he'd been selling building access schedules to outside parties, Hess confirmed, scrolling through records that had clearly taken considerable effort to unearth. Nothing provable enough for criminal charges at the time, just enough for quiet termination and a sealed file. And now he's supplying off-world conspirators with restricted weapons, Lyra said. Which means whoever orchestrated this had local knowledge of the Halcyon security gaps long before the attack knowledge a disgraced former security guard would have been uniquely positioned to provide. Cole sat back, turning the timeline over in his head, the old familiar instinct of someone who'd spent 6 years cataloguing a building's overlooked details now applied to something far larger than a stuck door or a busted camera. 3 years is a long time to hold a grudge quietly. Either somebody recruited him recently specifically for this, or he's been selling access to anyone willing to pay since the day he got fired, and this just happened to be the job that finally mattered. Either is plausible, Hess said. Though if it's the latter, it widens our concern considerably. It would mean the Halcyon security gaps have been a known, exploitable vulnerability for years, available to any buyer with the right connections, not a vulnerability created specifically for this attack, but one this attack simply happened to be the first to fully exploit. That's not better, Cole said grimly. No, Hess agreed. It is not. The forged maintenance request, Cole said slowly, pieces clicking together with the particular satisfaction of a puzzle finally yielding to patience. The one that authorized access to the 41st floor's window seals 3 days before the attack. That's not something a Thessanari conspirator could arrange alone, not without knowing exactly which Earthside systems to falsify. Marsh would have known. He'd have known the maintenance request system, the camera blind spots, all of it. Director Hess was already moving, comm unit in hand, issuing instructions to a team Cole hadn't fully tracked the existence of until this exact moment. Earthside investigators, working in careful coordination with the Thessanari inquiry, their involvement kept deliberately quiet to avoid tipping off whoever else might be watching. If we move on Marsh now, Hess said, and he's connected to whoever's running this from the Thessanari side, we risk spooking the larger operation before we understand its full scope. But if we wait, and he's preparing for another attempt, he's not going to wait politely while we investigate, Cole said. Guys like that don't stick around once a job's exposed. If you don't move now, he's gone, and so's whatever he knows. Hess looked at him for a long moment, weighing the assessment of a janitor against years of professional training, and found apparently that the janitor's read on urgency matched her own. We move tonight, she said. The safe house erupted into quiet, controlled motion, Hess's team coordinating with a joint Earth Thessanari task force assembled with unusual speed for a target whose case file, until that afternoon, had sat largely dormant. Cole watched from the security feed as tactical teams staged 2 blocks from Marsh's apartment. The careful choreography of people who'd done this before, and found himself for the first time since the freight terminal, entirely on the sidelines of his own story, a civilian, watching a trained team handle the part of the job that required training he simply didn't have. You don't have to watch if it makes you anxious, Lyra said quietly, settling beside him at the monitor. "I'm not anxious," Cole said, which was mostly true. "I'm just used to being the guy doing something, not the guy watching other people do something." "I understand that feeling rather well," Lyra said, with the particular dry note she reserved for moments of genuine empathy disguised as humour. "Welcome to 3 weeks of my life." Cole huffed something that was almost a laugh, despite the tension in the room, and reached over to take her hand, the two of them watching together as Hess's voice crackled occasional updates over the comm team in position. No movement detected. Breach in 60 seconds until the raid finally went forward, fast and clean, and in the end, 11 minutes. Too late. Part 7. What Marsh Knew. The raid on Dale Marsh's apartment, conducted by a joint Earth Thessanari task force under cover of darkness, found the apartment empty, bed unmade, refrigerator stocked, every sign of a man who had left in a hurry sometime in the last few hours, alerted by some channel none of the investigators had yet identified. What it did find, in a hidden compartment beneath the apartment's floorboards, was a data drive that took Hess's forensic team less than an hour to crack and considerably longer to fully process, because what it contained reshaped the entire scope of the investigation. Shipping manifests, encrypted communications, partially decrypted, referencing a recurring buyer designated only as the steward, coordinates for at least 3 off-world rendezvous points along the outer trade corridors, the same corridors Tamas's survey expedition had been charting, the same corridors Commander Voth's task force had once investigated for weapons trafficking, and buried in the drive's deepest encrypted layer, a single image file that made Lyra go very still when Hess finally showed it to her. A grainy surveillance photograph, clearly taken without its subject's knowledge, of a young Thessanari man in plain travelling clothes standing on the deck of an unfamiliar vessel, alive, unharmed, but unmistakably not free to leave. "Tamis," Lyra breathed. "The image is dated 6 days ago," Hess said carefully, "which means, as of 6 days ago, your brother was alive. Where was it taken? We don't know yet. The metadata's been stripped. We're working on it." Hess hesitated. "Lyra, Your Highness, I have to be honest with you. This file suggests an operation considerably larger than anything we initially understood. Weapons trafficking, hostage leverage, coordination across multiple parties on both our worlds. The attempt on your life may have been only one small piece of something this steward figure has been building for considerably longer than 3 weeks." Lyra stared at the image of her brother for a long moment, something fierce and frightened and determined all warring openly across her face for the first time since Cole had met her. "Then we find this steward," she said, "before whoever they are finishes whatever they've started." Part 8. A Promise Made Twice. Cole found her alone on the rooftop again that night, the city spread out, indifferent and glittering below them, the data drive's contents still settling heavy in the air between everyone who'd seen them. "You don't have to say it," Lyra said quietly without turning. "I know what comes next isn't a conversation about staying in a safe house." "Wasn't going to ask you to," Cole said, settling beside her at the railing. "Wasn't really an option after that first night, was it? You don't really do stay safely on the sidelines." "No," she admitted, "I do not." She finally turned to look at him, violet eyes catching the city lights the same way they had that very first impossible night, before any of this. The conspiracy, the missing brother, the trafficking network reaching across 2 worlds, had become real. "Cole, whatever this becomes, wherever this steward leads, I cannot promise it ends safely. I cannot promise it ends soon. I am beginning to suspect this was never simply about a single assassination attempt at all, and the deeper we go, the more dangerous the answer is likely to be." "Figured that out somewhere around the part where they showed us your brother's photo," Cole said. "Wasn't planning on backing out before that, and I'm definitely not planning on it now." "Why?" The question came out quieter than she meant it to, more vulnerable. "You are not bound to any of this. Not by duty, not by court obligation, Not by anything beyond a single accidental night shift and whatever this has become between us since. Cole considered the question seriously, the way he tried to consider most things that actually mattered, because that single accidental night shift turned into the only thing in my life that's ever made me feel like the boring parts were worth something. 6 years of knowing where every busted camera and stuck door in that building was, and it turns out all of it mattered eventually for exactly the one night it needed to. I'm not walking away from whatever this becomes just because the stakes got bigger. They were always going to get bigger. That's apparently just how this works. Lyra studied him for a long moment, something soft and fierce both settling into her expression at once. Then I suppose we find this steward together, whatever it costs. Whatever it costs, Cole agreed, and the quiet that followed held the particular weight of two people choosing, deliberately and with open eyes, to walk further into danger neither of them fully understood yet, because the alternative, waiting safely while a missing brother and an unravelling conspiracy went unanswered, had stopped being a real option for either of them somewhere over the last 3 weeks. Part 9. The trail picks up. The metadata on Tamas's surveillance photograph finally yielded a result 4 days later, not a precise location, but a partial signature match to a known smuggling waypoint along the outer trade corridors. A relay station with a reputation, according to Kalanor's old intelligence contacts, for asking very few questions about cargo or passengers as long as payment cleared. It's not confirmation, Hess cautioned, laying the analysis out for the assembled group, Cole, Lyra, Kalanor, and a Queen's projection that had grown steadily grimmer over 4 days of mounting evidence. But it's the strongest lead we have, and the steward's operation appears to route a significant portion of its trafficked cargo and communications through that exact corridor. Then that is where we go, Lyra said. Your Highness, Kalanor said carefully, an unescorted journey to a known smuggling waypoint in pursuit of a trafficking operation that has already demonstrated both the resources and the willingness to attempt your assassination is exactly the kind of decision I am tired of letting other people make on my behalf, Lyra finished. I have spent 3 weeks in a safe house, while an inquiry I cannot fully control determines the shape of a danger I am, apparently, at the centre of. My brother is alive, frightened, and held by people who have already proven they do not hesitate to use violence against my own family. I do not intend to wait for a committee's permission to go find him. It is not merely about permission, Kalanor pressed, though his tone had softened, the argument of a man who suspected he had already lost it. It is about resources. A waypoint of that nature will not be undefended, and we do not yet know whether the steward's network has agents positioned to recognize you on sight. If this becomes a second assassination attempt in territory considerably less controlled than a freight yard on Earth, then we plan for that, Cole interrupted, surprising himself slightly with the firmness in his own voice. Properly. With Hess's people, with whatever intel Kalanor's contacts can pull together, with a real extraction plan instead of just walking in blind. Nobody's saying go in unprepared. We're saying don't sit here for another 3 weeks while whoever's holding Tamas decides what happens to him next. Director Hess, silent until now, finally spoke. For what it's worth, Your Highness. Lord Kalanor, I agree with Cole. Waiting carries its own risk, and we've already lost more time than I'm comfortable with. If we move deliberately, with proper coordination, I believe the risk is manageable. Not eliminated. Manageable. Kalanor studied the room for a long moment. Lyra's resolve, Cole's quiet insistence, Hess's professional endorsement, and finally inclined his head, the gesture of a man recognizing when an argument had run its course. Then I will not stand in the way of it. I will, however, insist on accompanying you myself. My contacts along that corridor will prove more useful in person than relayed second-hand, and I find I have my own reasons to want this resolved quickly. The Queen's projection was silent for a long moment. You intend to go yourself? I do, Lyra said. With proper security, with Lord Calinor's intelligence contacts, and with Cole. She glanced at him, something steady and certain in the look. He has proven twice now that his particular skills are not easily replaced by trained protocol alone. I would rather face this with him beside me than without. The Queen's projection studied her daughter for a long, weighing moment, the particular look, Cole suspected, of a mother measuring exactly how much her daughter had changed since the gesture of goodwill she'd sent to Earth 3 months ago had nearly come home in a body bag instead. Then go, Queen Aislinn said finally, quietly. Find your brother. Find this steward. And Lyra, something almost soft, entered the Queen's projected voice. Come home, both of you. I find I am not prepared to lose either of my children to whatever this has become. Part 10. Into the dark, the transport left Earth orbit 2 days later. A modest Thessanari vessel disguised as a private trade hauler, carrying Lyra, Cole, Calinor, a small security detail Hess had personally vetted, and a single data drive's worth of evidence pointing toward a relay station neither of them had ever heard of 3 weeks earlier, and now carried the entire weight of a missing prince and an unravelling two-world conspiracy. Cole stood at the observation port as Earth fell away behind them, the planet shrinking to a pale blue marble against the dark, and felt the particular vertigo of a man whose entire life 6 weeks earlier had consisted of mop buckets and bad knees and a building he knew better than anyone had ever needed him to. He'd called Priya before they shipped out, kept the explanation as vague as the situation allowed, and she'd gone quiet on the line for a long moment before telling him, in a voice that wasn't quite steady, to come home in one piece, and that she expected a much longer explanation than off-world diplomatic matter once he did. Regretting it yet? Lyra asked, joining him at the port. Not even a little, Cole said, and found, looking at her, that it was entirely true. Though I'm going to need somebody to explain to me what a steward actually is before we get wherever we're going. I do not know, Lyra admitted. None of us do. A title, a code name, possibly a single individual, possibly an organization operating under shared authority. The data drive offers no clarity, only the certainty that whoever or whatever it is has been operating across both our worlds for considerably longer than any of us understood, trafficking weapons and people through corridors none of our governments have properly secured. Great, Cole said. Walking into the unknown to rescue your brother from a mystery criminal organization with an ominous one-word name. Very reassuring. You did not have to come, Lyra reminded him gently. Said that already, Cole said. Still true. He took her hand, steady now in a way that had become as natural as breathing over 6 short, impossible weeks. Whatever's out there, whatever this steward turns out to be, we'll figure it out the same way we figured out the first night. Together, mostly improvised, probably against everybody's better judgment. That does seem to be working for us, Lyra said, and the small smile that followed carried, beneath the very real danger waiting somewhere ahead in the dark, something that looked almost like hope. The transport's engines hummed beneath them, carrying 2 people who had met as strangers in a quiet hallway 6 weeks earlier toward a relay station neither of them could yet picture, in pursuit of a missing prince, a vanished commander, and an organization whose true scope, resources, and reach remained for now, and likely for some while yet entirely, dangerously unknown. Behind them, Earth shrank further into the dark. Ahead, somewhere past the edge of every map either of their governments had properly charted, the steward's network waited, patient and unseen, for a princess and a janitor who had no idea yet how deep the conspiracy actually ran, or how many people on both their worlds had already chosen a side in a war neither Earth nor Thessanar yet realized had begun. Neither Cole nor Lyra had an answer for what waited at the relay station, or whether Tamis would still be there when they arrived, or whether Commander Voth had acted alone or as one piece of something considerably larger. They did not know who the steward truly was, or how many other worlds had already been quietly drawn into whatever this organization had been building. What they knew, standing together at the observation port as the last light of Earth faded behind them, was simple, and had carried them this far already. They would face whatever came next together. The rest, as it had been 3 weeks earlier in a freight yard on the edge of a city neither of their families had ever expected to matter this much, would have to wait until they arrived.